Everybody is entitled to their own opinions. Don't accept propaganda terms. Propaganda terms are misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, anti-science, anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorists. Those are right out of the World War II playbook for totalitarianism and post-World War II Stalinist Russia. Don't accept these terms. There simply is an emerging problem, initially the infection, and now a wave of vaccine injuries and disabilities and sadly death, and there are multiple interpretive points of view.
For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Yugalini here in Whitby, Ontario at the Canadian Christian College for an event being put on by Canadians for Truth. It's featuring, as I have beside me here, guest speaker, one of the keynote speakers, Dr. Peter McCullough, internist and cardiologist from the United States, who was one of the earliest COVID dissident doctors. And the event here today is themed What's Next?, providing key insights and analysis into the future of health and medicine, and I suppose the broader topic of wellness and well-being. And so you haven't spoken yet, Dr. McCullough, and I so appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. If you can give us a little preview of your key insights and analysis, what are those going to be?
I'm delighted to be here. First and foremost, Canadians for Truth has really been on the vanguard of bringing Canadians new opinions. And in the world of medicine, it's all about second, third, and fourth opinions. And what's happened through the pandemic is we've seen a shutdown of any other viewpoints outside of what appears to be a government narrative all over the world all at once. Now I'm in practice as a medical doctor, so I see patients every day, saw them yesterday, full day in the office. And what I am seeing is there have been two waves of injury to the population. The first wave was the SARS-CoV-2 infection, which was a real infection. 97% of us have had it. Severe cases early in 2020, a large fraction, and then fewer later on, developed residual symptoms called long COVID, which is a real syndrome. And then on top of that, in the United States, we had about 75% of Americans took a COVID vaccine. The COVID vaccine installs the same protein that causes long COVID, called the spike protein, in the human body. So the vaccine makes long COVID worse because it's more spike protein. So in my office, we measure spike protein, and we have devised methods of helping the body clear this and then get people through it. So I think what's next initially is going to be what's called spike detoxification. I'm going to mention this tonight as a fundamental way that people can handle this. Fortunately, our tools are over-the-counter nutraceuticals that are available to everybody in the world. You probably noticed is wildly popular the use of nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin in combination. Other things can be added. Probably takes a year or more to fundamentally start to change these laboratory parameters. People clinically get better from long COVID and from these vaccine injury syndromes. But what we've seen is that this is not the end of this great controversy.
Well, and that leads me to the latest development with the Food and Drug Administration in the U.S. in particular. Just at the end of August here, they've authorized the latest COVID booster injection for anybody aged 6 months and up. And as my colleague Alexa Lavoie discussed with Dr. Robert Malone recently at the CPAC convention in Mexico, he said, that the decision was largely based on what I call hopium. So the hope that this would work, the hope that it would prevent and be better preventative against the strains that we're seeing circulating now. What's your response to the FDA utilizing still emergency use authorization to approve these subsequent boosters?
There's a complete abrogation of following regulatory law. So emergency use authorization can only be in the setting of a public health emergency. Now, President Biden last year dropped the public health emergency. There is no emergency. The companies ought to take products through full development, full preclinical safety dossiers, full clinical trials. There's plenty of money to do all of this and bring safer products to market. Now, 97% of us have already had COVID. So we know that once somebody's had it, the natural immunity protects against severe disease. In a paper by Chin and colleagues, New England Journal of Medicine, 2022, zero risk of hospitalization and death on second and third cases of COVID. Zero. So that means That's whether or not someone took a vaccine. The vaccine is now irrelevant for the vast majority of us. Can it offer theoretical protection to some person who has yet not come in contact with COVID? It's theoretically possible. I wouldn't advise it because our treatments are so good. So we have multiple FDA-approved treatments. We use other drugs in combination. We get people through the illness. So I think the strategy of featuring the vaccine as the fundamental approach to handling the pandemic has essentially backfired. It's promoted the virus to mutate and have resistant strains, and it never prevented COVID. It never reduced severe illness, and unfortunately has a ton of side effects.
Well, and there are some studies and more so papers out showing that the more injected one is, the more likely they are to become ill and thus potentially hospitalized and unfortunately death with the natural infection of COVID.
It's true. Shretha and colleagues, Cleveland Clinic, 51,000 employees. Those who took the most shots have the most recurrent COVID. Essentially, it's backfired. You know, our CDC data, as of April of this year, only 1.6% of Americans are taking COVID shots. So this is not well subscribed. We have Kaiser Family Foundation data, Rasmussen survey data showing a large fraction of Americans believe the vaccines are not safe and they're resulting in large numbers of deaths.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to get back to something that you mentioned there in the regulatory space. Here in Canada, specifically, our regulator, Health Canada, has revoked and pulled from the market the XBB Omicron-specific boosters. And they say they've done it under the guise of the next one, the KP.2, will come to market and follow likely in the FDA's footsteps, as they did at the end of August. What do you say to a regulator that has decided to essentially destroy those XBB variant-specific boosters or vaccines or genetic injections, however you want to coin these products on the market? What do you make of the regulator taking that step, which is really unprecedented? Prior to this particular instance, they did things like extended the expiry deadlines. They changed storage and transportation regulations so that people could get what they were calling these life-saving treatments.
It's destroying evidence. Quite frankly, the vaccine manufacturers are under lawsuit. In the UK, it's AstraZeneca. They voluntarily pulled. In the United States, Janssen's been voluntarily pulled. Pfizer's being sued by 5 states, probably soon to be many more, for deceptive trade practices. The vaccines never went through standard preclinical development for pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, teratogenicity, oncogenicity, biodistribution. These vials are valuable for us to study what went wrong with the vaccine campaign, and yet they're being destroyed. And so we've only had just a minimal look at what's in the vaccines. I think everybody should be very alarmed that not a single government in the world has opened the vials and inspected what's in them. The FDA inspections of the vials so far has been just for visible debris, of which there's a lot. The Japanese have returned millions of vials for visible debris. That should make anybody uncomfortable in taking one of these shots.
Mm-hmm. And we know that Health Canada admitted that there's the SV40 promoter in the injection. We know that the DNA contamination is hundreds of times greater than what are the regulated tolerable amounts. What are your thoughts as those issues continue to come to light and the regulator continues to back these as, safe and effective?
The single greatest concern regarding SV40 or simian virus 40, and by the way, there's 3 fragments, the origin of insertion, the promoter, and enhancer, is that they're known proto-oncogene activators. And in a paper by Bustos and Anguez from Portland, they have proposed that the vaccines, through multiple mechanisms, almost certainly promote cancer. So the spike protein inhibits tumor suppressor systems P53 and BRCA. The messenger RNA itself impairs DNA repair, and now contamination with SV40. We're talking about Pfizer and Moderna having great concerns now that they could be promoting cancer. And now, since 2021, every cancer registry in the world is on the way up. What most people need to know is we're talking largely about solid organ cancers, like lung cancer, kidney cancer, etc. From the time a cancer begins to the time it's clinically recognized, typically 5 years. So what we think is the vaccines in those with nascent cancers yet to be detected has potentially accelerated the course of the cancer, and so the apt term is turbo cancer.
Yeah. A lot of people are saying, oh, well, you can't differentiate between the natural COVID infection and that spike causing cancer versus what the vaccine has potentially done in the body. How do you differentiate between, COVID, long COVID, and then vaccine injury?
The virus itself does install the spike protein in the human body, but it's just the S1 segment. It sacrifices the S2 segment, which is the proximal segment to the nucleocapsid, at the ACE2 receptor or TMPRSS2 receptor. So we just have S1 in the human body in those who have had the infection, no vaccine. And we measure antibodies to this, and the antibody titers on the range we use in our clinic, normal should be less than 1. Typically 0 to 1,000 of arbitrary units is low-level infection. With the vaccine, which installs full-length spike protein, S1 and S2, which can be identified by mass spec, as shown by Brogna and colleagues, we see levels of 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 25,000. So it's orders of magnitude higher spike protein from the vaccine. Now, because the vaccine doesn't work, most people who've been vaccinated have had COVID as well. So they've actually been double or triple dosed on spike protein. I think it's probably going to be a quantitative exposure. What the regulatory agencies in Canada and the United States have not done is cumulative toxicity studies. We should see what are the side effects at 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots, 4 shots, 5 shots. Is there cumulative toxicity? They refuse to do standard safety testing and have not given any consideration to this grave cancer concern that we have with the vaccines.
Is there any coming back from this? I mean, how does a regulator like the FDA or Health Canada, who continues to disregard the most groundbreaking science on this and not conduct these independent safety reviews, can they come back from this? Can trust in these regulators be restored?
A recent paper in JAMA demonstrated that trust in physicians and health systems is rock bottom low. It's like under 50%. I think the answer is, I think we're in for about a 20-year course. And the reason why I say this, in my book, Courage to Face COVID-19, I outline this. In the mid-19th century, when Ignaz Semmelweis had the data showing that doctors should wash their hands, otherwise they'll spread infection to other women who are pregnant and actually cause fatal postpartum sepsis, he was castigated, he was censored, he was kicked aside, and it was 20 years later the medical community said, "Oh, we were right. We should have been washing our hands." Semmelweis was right. Rosenhill, around 1950, proposed that smoking caused lung cancer. Doctors and nurses and health administrators were advertising cigarettes. They were smoking in the operating rooms. 20 years later, Surgeon General report, smoking causes lung cancer. Now, opioid pandemic. Purdue Pharma, the doctors, these opioids, they won't be addictive. Now it's 20 years deep into now we have a crisis. The medical orthodoxy, when they're wrong on something, and they are wrong on these vaccines, it's typically a 20-year corrective course. It's almost as if large numbers of people need to be retired or terminated, and that's what we're looking at right now. I think the current FDA commissioners, CDC heads, Health and Human Services in the United States, Health Canada, all your royal colleges, there has to be a house cleaning because they can't come back from this. They advised the vaccines. They took the vaccines themselves. They mandated on their employers. We haven't seen anybody come out and said, "I'm sorry," and I don't expect we will see that. Unfortunately, that's not human nature. When people are too deep into it, they essentially have to retire, go away, be terminated, and a new group come in and recognize we've got a major problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just in closing, for people who want to empower themselves to take their health into their own hands, who might not trust these institutions and these regulators anymore, what is your message to them, and how can they go about starting that process to empower themselves to take their health into their own hands?
Main message is do your own research. Don't have any individual in a position of authority try to tell you what they think the state of affairs are. Everybody is entitled to their own opinions. Don't accept propaganda terms. Propaganda terms are misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, anti-science, anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorists. Those are right out of the World War II playbook for totalitarianism. And post-World War II Stalinist Russia don't accept these terms. There simply is an emerging problem, initially the infection, and now a wave of vaccine injuries and disabilities and sadly death. And there are multiple interpretive points of view. So do your own research. Look towards organizations bringing you those different opinions, like Canadians for Truth, like Rebel News, independent media that's resistant to this new groupthink about the suppression of speech and suppression of individual thought, and most importantly, consider some natural approaches. Now, McCullough protocol-based spike protein detoxification features nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. There can be other natural products added to that, but this appears to work far better than a prescription pharmaceutical to get people out of the spike protein toxicity problem.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time, Dr. McCullough. I always appreciate chatting with you. For Rebel News here in Whitby, I'm Tamara Yugalini.